She sat next to the billionaire CEO on a red eye. He landed to a custody order. Is this some kind of joke? Grant Mercer whispered, his voice barely audible over the drone of the airplane engines. Liana Brooks met his gaze steadily, her expression neither triumphant nor apologetic. Just resolute. No, she replied. It's time. The sealed envelope sat between them on the armrest, crisp, white, official. Inside were documents that would shatter the carefully constructed world Grant had built in the 8 years since he'd last seen her. A custody petition. A DNA test request. A court summons. His fingers hovered over the envelope but didn't touch it, as if it might burn him. In the dim cabin of the red-eye flight from Los Angeles to New York, his face was cast in shadows, but Liana could still see the emotions warring across features she once knew better than her own. Shock, disbelief, anger, and something deeper that might have been fear. 8 years, he finally said, his voice tight. 8 years of silence, and you ambushed me on a plane. I didn't plan this, Liana said quietly. The universe has a strange sense of timing. Grant's jaw clenched as he turned away, staring out the darkened window at nothing. The empty seat between them suddenly felt symbolic. A physical manifestation of the vast distance 8 years had carved between two people who once couldn't bear to be apart. Neither spoke again for the remainder of the flight. But as the plane began its descent into New York, Liana noticed Grant's knuckles widening as he gripped the armrest, his breathing shallow. Not from fear of flying, she knew. But from the realization that once they landed, there would be no more running from the truth. The truth about the son he never knew existed. For nearly 8 years, Liana Brooks lived a life defined by quiet resilience. She worked long nights as a neonatal nurse, raised her son with tenderness and fire, and carried a truth she never intended to weaponize, the truth about who her child's father was. Her small 2-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles wasn't luxurious, but it was home. Walls covered with Noah's artwork, shelves filled with books and treasured photographs, windows that caught the morning light in a way that made even the most ordinary days feel somehow blessed. Mom! Have you seen my space model? Noah called from his bedroom, his voice carrying the slight urgency that accompanied all his questions lately. At 7, almost 8, he approached life with an intensity that sometimes took Liana's breath away. So familiar, so reminiscent of someone she tried not to think about. Check under your bed, she replied, pouring cereal into a bowl. That's where I found your missing dinosaur book yesterday. Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway moments later, triumphantly holding a solar system model he'd constructed for his science project. His dark hair was still rumpled from sleep, his storm blue eyes, Grant's eyes, bright with excitement. Found it. Ms. Rodriguez is going to be so impressed. I added the asteroid belt, see? Most kids just do the planets, but I researched and found out that the asteroid belt is crucial to understanding our solar system's formation, Liana finished with a smile, having heard this explanation at least 3 times since he completed the project. It looks amazing, sweetheart. Now eat your breakfast before it gets soggy. Noah carefully set his model on the counter and slid into his chair, immediately launching into a detailed account of what his class would be learning that day. Liana listened, nodding at appropriate intervals, while mentally reviewing her own schedule, day's shift at the hospital, grocery shopping during Noah's after-school program, then home for dinner and homework. The routine was well established, a carefully choreographed dance of single motherhood that Liana had perfected over the years. But lately, there had been a new element disrupting their rhythm, Noah's increasingly specific questions about his father. Mom, he said suddenly, interrupting his own story about planetary orbits, Jamie's dad is coming to Career Day next week to talk about being an architect. He designs actual skyscrapers. Liana nodded, sensing where this was heading. That sounds interesting. Yeah. Noah pushed his cereal around the bowl. Ms. Rodriguez said we can invite any family member who has a cool job. He looked up, those storm blue eyes piercing. You could come and talk about being a nurse. That's pretty cool. I'd be happy to, Liana said, relief washing over her. Maybe this wasn't about Grant after all. But Noah wasn't finished. Or, maybe my dad could come. If he has a cool job too. And there it was. The question that had been appearing in different forms with increasing frequency. Noah, Liana began carefully, we've talked about this. Your father isn't part of our lives. But why? Noah persisted. Is he dead? Did he do something bad? Doesn't he know about me? Each question landed like a physical blow. Liana had always promised herself she would never lie to Noah about Grant, but the complete truth felt too complex for a 7-year-old to bear. How could she explain that his father had once been the center of her world? That grief and ambition had transformed him into someone she no longer recognized. That she had walked away to protect herself, never telling him about the child they had created? Your father isn't dead, she said finally. And he didn't do anything terrible. Sometimes adults make complicated choices, and relationships don't work out the way people hope they will. But does he know about me? Noah pressed, zeroing in on the one question she had avoided. Liana met her son's gaze, seeing in it not just curiosity but a deeper need, a need to understand his own story, to know if he had been rejected or simply unknown. No, she admitted softly. He doesn't know about you. Noah absorbed this, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. So he didn't choose not to be my dad. He just doesn't know he is one. That's right. Then why don't we tell him? The question was so simple, so logical, so innocent of the emotional complexities that had kept Liana silent for 8 years. It's complicated, sweetheart, she said, falling back on the explanation that was becoming increasingly inadequate. Now finish your breakfast. The bus will be here soon. Later, after Noah had left for school with his precious solar system model, Liana sat at the kitchen table, her untouched coffee growing cold. Noah's questions echoed in her mind, alongside the conversation she'd had with her sister just days earlier. He deserves to know his father, Mia had insisted during their weekly phone call. And legally, Grant has rights too, whether you want to acknowledge them or not. I'm not keeping Noah from him out of spite, Liana had defended. Grant made it very clear that his company was his priority. He couldn't make room for me in his life, how could he possibly make room for a child? That was 8 years ago, Mia had countered. People change. And regardless, Noah is asking questions you can't keep deflecting. Do you want him growing up thinking his father didn't want him? Or worse, finding out on his own somehow and realizing you kept them apart? The truth of her sister's words had settled uncomfortably in Liana's chest. Noah was getting older, more perceptive, more determined to understand his own story. And she had to admit that her reasons for keeping Grant in the dark had evolved over the years, from self-protection in the raw aftermath of their breakup, to practical independence as she built a life without him, to a more complicated fear of disrupting the stable world she had created for her son. But Noah's direct question that morning, then why don't we tell him? Had stripped away the layers of justification. The simple truth remained, Grant Mercer was Noah's father. And regardless of their past, Noah had a right to know his father, and Grant had a right to know his son. Which was why, 3 days later, Liana found herself sitting across from a family law attorney, discussing the process of establishing legal paternity. Given Mr. Mercer's financial status and public profile, this will likely be complicated, the attorney, Diane Reeves, explained. We should prepare for the possibility that he might contest paternity initially, or that his legal team will push for minimal involvement with maximum confidentiality. I'm not interested in his money, Liana clarified. This isn't about financial support. Noah and I have managed fine on our own. I understand, Diane said, making notes. But the court will still establish child support based on both parents' incomes. It's standard procedure, regardless of whether you're seeking it. Liana nodded, trying to imagine Grant's reaction to discovering not only that he had a son, but that legal proceedings had been initiated without any prior conversation. It felt wrong somehow, impersonal and confrontational, when what she really wanted was a chance to explain, to show him pictures of Noah, to help him understand the remarkable child they had created. "Is there any way to approach him privately first?" she asked. "Before formal legal action?" Diane looked up from her notes. "We could send a letter requesting a meeting, but given what you've told me about your history and his position, there's a significant risk it would be intercepted by assistants or legal counsel. The formal petition ensures he personally receives the information." Liana sighed, recognizing the reality of the situation. Grant wasn't the law student she had fallen in love with anymore. He was Grant Mercer, CEO of Mercer Holdings, whose time and attention were guarded by layers of staff and whose life was documented in financial publications and business profiles. A simple phone call or email would likely never reach him. "All right," she agreed reluctantly. "Let's proceed with the formal petition." The process moved forward with surprising efficiency. DNA samples were collected from Noah. A simple cheek swab that Liana explained was to help us find some information about your dad. The petition was drafted, reviewed, and finalized. A court date was set for the initial hearing. The final step was serving Grant with the papers, legally notifying him of the petition and court date. This proved unexpectedly challenging when Diane's office discovered that Grant was out of the country on business and wouldn't return until just before the scheduled hearing. "We have a problem," Diane explained during a phone call. "Mr. Mercer is in Tokyo for the next 2 weeks. He's scheduled to return to New York the day before our court date, but service requires personal delivery. If we can't serve him in time, we'll have to request a continuance." "Can't they serve him in Tokyo?" Liana asked, concerned about delaying the process now that she had committed to it. "International service is complicated and time-consuming," Diane replied. "Our best option is to have someone ready to serve him as soon as he returns to the U.S." Which was how, through a series of coincidences that later seemed almost orchestrated by fate, Liana found herself booking a red-eye flight from Los Angeles to New York, the same flight, she would discover only at boarding, that would carry Grant Mercer home from his international business trip. The night of the flight, Liana left Noah with her sister, explaining that she had to take a quick trip to New York for grown-up business, and would be back in 2 days. "Is it about my dad?" Noah asked perceptively as she packed her overnight bag. Liana paused, caught off guard by his intuition. "What makes you ask that?" Noah shrugged, trying to appear casual though his eyes betrayed his interest. "You've been making a lot of phone calls and looking at papers. And you seem nervous. And you never go anywhere without me unless it's really important." Liana sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. Noah joined her, his small body warm against her side. "Yes," she admitted. "It is about your dad. I'm going to talk to him about meeting you." Noah's eyes widened. "Really? You found him?" "I always knew how to find him," Liana clarified gently. "I just needed to be sure the timing was right. For all of us." "What's he like?" Noah asked, the question she had deflected so many times before. This time, Liana allowed herself to answer honestly. "He's very smart. Determined. Good at solving problems. You have his eyes, and his curiosity." She smiled softly. "And his inability to let go of a question until you have an answer." Noah absorbed this information with obvious satisfaction. "Do you think he'll want to meet me?" The question pierced Liana's heart. "Anyone who gets to know you would be lucky," she said, carefully avoiding a direct promise she couldn't guarantee. "Now, you be good for Aunt Mia, okay? I'll be back before you know it." Later, as her flight was called for boarding, Liana felt a mixture of determination and apprehension. The legal papers were securely in her carry-on, along with recent photos of Noah and a letter she had written explaining her reasons for not telling Grant sooner. A letter she wasn't sure she would have the courage to give him. She made her way down the aisle of the plane, finding her assigned seat in the middle section. The window seat was already occupied by a businessman focused on his laptop, but the aisle seat remained empty. Liana settled in, stowing her bag and preparing for the overnight flight. Just as the boarding announcements were concluding, a commotion at the front of the cabin caught her attention. A flight attendant was escorting a late arrival, a tall figure in an impeccably tailored suit, his attention divided between the phone at his ear and the boarding pass in his hand. Liana's heart stopped. Grant Mercer. 8 years had added subtle lines around his eyes and threads of silver at his temples, but otherwise, he looked remarkably unchanged, the same commanding presence, the same intense focus, the same ability to make everyone else in a room fade into background. He ended his call as he approached her row, tucking the phone into his jacket pocket with a practiced motion. His gaze was on his boarding pass, checking the seat number. "Excuse me," he said without looking up. "I believe that's my seat." Liana couldn't move, as recognition crashed over her in waves. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She was meant to find him in New York, to have the papers professionally served, to maintain the emotional distance that legal proceedings would provide. Not to sit beside him for 6 hours in the confined space of an airplane. Grant finally looked up, impatience flickering across his features, an expression that froze as his eyes met hers. "Liana." Her name escaped him in a breath, barely audible. For a moment, neither spoke. The businessman in the window seat glanced up curiously, then returned to his laptop, oblivious to the emotional earthquake occurring beside him. "Your seat," Liana finally managed, gesturing to the empty space beside her. Grant sat mechanically, his movements stiff, his expression cycling rapidly through shock, confusion, and wariness. He stowed his briefcase under the seat in front of him, his actions automatic while his mind visibly raced. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration as the plane pushed back from the gate. Liana stared straight ahead, acutely aware of Grant beside her, the familiar scent of his cologne, the tension radiating from his body, the slight tremor in his hands as he fastened his seatbelt. "What are you doing here?" he finally asked, his voice low, controlled. "Flying to New York," Liana replied, the simplicity of the answer belying the complexity of the situation. "On this specific flight?" Grant's tone sharpened with suspicion. "Seated right next to me? That's quite a coincidence." "I didn't know you would be on this flight," Liana said truthfully. "I'm as surprised as you are." Grant studied her, his gaze searching for deception. Finding none, his expression shifted subtly. "It's been a long time." 8 years, Liana confirmed. "You look well," he offered, the politeness feeling absurdly inadequate given their history. "So do you. Success agrees with you." A flight attendant approached, offering pre-takeoff beverages. Both declined, the interruption providing a momentary reprieve from the tension between them. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Liana gathered her courage. This wasn't how she had planned to deliver the news, but perhaps fate had intervened for a reason. Perhaps this unexpected proximity was an opportunity for a more human conversation before legal proceedings took over. "Grant," she began once they had reached cruising altitude. "There's something I need to tell you." His expression immediately guarded. "I assumed as much. People don't typically seek out ex-partners after 8 years of silence for casual conversation." The coolness in his tone stung, though Liana reminded herself it was a natural defense. The Grant she had known, the one who had held her through thunderstorms and laughed with her until sunrise, was buried somewhere beneath the polished exterior of the man beside her. "I have a son," she said directly, watching his face for reaction. Grant's expression remained carefully neutral. "Congratulations. I'm sure he's wonderful." "He is," Liana agreed. "He's 7, almost 8. His name is Noah." She saw the exact moment understanding dawned, the slight widening of his eyes, the quick mental calculation, the color draining from his face. 7, he repeated, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. 8 years since we. Yes, Liana confirmed quietly. Grant's composure cracked, a flash of raw emotion breaking through his carefully maintained control. Are you saying? He's your son, Liana finished for him. Yes. The silence that followed was deafening despite the ambient noise of the aircraft. Grant stared straight ahead, his breathing shallow, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles whitened. Why, he finally managed, the single word laden with questions. Why didn't you tell me? Why now? Why like this? Liana had rehearsed explanations countless times, imagining this moment, but now that it had arrived, the carefully prepared words felt inadequate. When I found out I was pregnant, we had already broken up, she began. You were drowning in grief and responsibility. You made it clear that your focus had to be on saving your father's company, that there was no room in your life for distractions, including me. A child is not a distraction, Grant said, his voice tight. No, Liana agreed. But that's how you viewed our relationship at the end. And I couldn't bear the thought of our child being seen the same way. Grant turned to face her fully, anger and hurt warring in his expression. So you made the decision for me. You decided I didn't deserve to know I had a son. I made the decision I thought was right at the time, Liana replied evenly. I was 24, heartbroken, and pregnant. You were becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone consumed by control and ambition. That's not fair, Grant countered. My father had just died. The company was on the verge of collapse. I was trying to save thousands of jobs, to preserve his legacy. I know, Liana said softly. I understood that then, and I understand it now. But understanding doesn't change how it felt to be pushed aside, to be told that loving you was interfering with your responsibilities. Grant flinched slightly, the memory of his own harsh words clearly hitting home. He was silent for a long moment, processing. 8 years, he said finally. Why now? This was the question Liana had been dreading most. Noah is asking about you. Specific questions I can't keep deflecting. He deserves to know his father, and you deserve to know him. Grant's expression softened slightly at the mention of his son. What is he like? The question caught Liana off guard. Not the anger or accusations she had expected, but genuine curiosity. She reached for her phone, scrolling to a recent photo of Noah with his science project. He's brilliant, she said, handing Grant the phone. Curious about everything. Loves space and dinosaurs and logical puzzles. He has your eyes, your analytical mind. But he's also kind, empathetic. He notices when other kids are left out or struggling. Grant stared at the photo, his expression transforming as he took in the boy's features, the unmistakable resemblance that no one could deny. His finger hovered over the screen as if he wanted to touch Noah's face but didn't quite dare. He built this? He asked, indicating the solar system model. Entirely on his own, Liana confirmed. He insisted on researching the proper scale and orbital patterns. His teacher was impressed, but a little overwhelmed by his enthusiasm for explaining the details. A ghost of a smile touched Grant's lips. I did the same thing in 3rd grade. My model included the Kuiper belt. The teacher had to look it up to confirm it was real. The shared memory, this unexpected connection across generations, created a moment of warmth in the tension between them. But it was fleeting, as reality reasserted itself. I should have been there, Grant said, his voice rough with emotion. For his first words, his first steps. For all of it. Yes, Liana agreed simply. You should have been. Grant handed the phone back, his movements careful, controlled. So what happens now? You've told me about him. What are you expecting from me? This was the moment. Liana reached into her bag and withdrew the sealed envelope containing the legal documents. "This is a petition to establish legal paternity," she explained, placing it on the armrest between them. "There's a court date scheduled for the day after tomorrow in New York. I was planning to have these served to you when we landed, but since we're here." Grant stared at the envelope, his expression hardening again. A court order. So this isn't about reconciliation or co-parenting. It's about legal enforcement. It's about doing things properly, Liana corrected. About establishing clear rights and responsibilities. Noah deserves that stability. Is this some kind of joke? Grant whispered, his voice barely audible over the drone of the engines. "No," Liana replied steadily. "It's time." Grant didn't touch the envelope. "You could have called. Written. Asked for a meeting. Instead, you're ambushing me with legal papers on a red-eye flight. Would you have taken my call?" Liana challenged. "Would an email from me have made it past your assistants? Or would it have been dismissed as someone from your past looking for money or attention?" The truth of her words hung between them. They both knew the answer. The Grant Mercer of today, CEO, public figure, financial powerhouse, was insulated from exactly the kind of personal complication Liana represented. "I need some time to process this," Grant said finally, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "I understand," Liana replied. "But the court date stands. And Noah is waiting for answers." Grant turned away, staring out the window at the darkness beyond, effectively ending the conversation. Liana didn't push further. She had delivered the news, provided the documentation. The next steps would unfold in their own time. For the remainder of the flight, they existed in strained silence. Grant alternated between pretending to work on his laptop and staring into the distance, his thoughts clearly far from the spreadsheets on his screen. Liana tried to rest, but sleep was impossible with the weight of their unfinished conversation hanging between them. As the plane began its descent into New York, Grant finally spoke again. "Does he hate me?" The vulnerability in the question caught Liana by surprise. "No," she answered honestly. "He doesn't know enough about you to hate you. He's curious, confused. He wants to understand why you're not in his life." "What have you told him about me?" "The truth, or parts of it. That you and I loved each other once. That we broke up before I knew I was pregnant. That you don't know about him." Liana paused. "I've never spoken badly of you to him, Grant. Whatever issues are between us, they're not his burden to carry." Something like gratitude flickered across Grant's features. "Thank you for that, at least." The plane touched down with a slight jolt, taxiing toward the terminal as passengers around them began gathering belongings and turning on phones. Grant remained seated, making no move to retrieve his briefcase or check his messages. "What happens after the court hearing?" he asked, his voice low enough that only Liana could hear. "That depends on you," she replied honestly. "The legal process establishes paternity and basic rights and responsibilities. How involved you choose to be in Noah's life beyond that is your decision." Grant's expression tightened. "You think I wouldn't want to be involved? That I'd acknowledge him legally but remain absent?" "I don't know what you want, Grant," Liana said simply. "I don't know who you are anymore. The man I loved wouldn't have walked away from us without a backward glance. The man who replaced him, the one consumed by control and corporate power. I have no idea what he values or what choices he would make." The harsh assessment landed visibly, Grant's jaw clenching as he absorbed her words. Before he could respond, his phone began buzzing incessantly, text messages, emails, and calls flooding in as it reconnected to the network. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting from personal hurt to professional concern as he scrolled through the notifications. "What the hell? Problem?" Liana asked, unable to suppress her curiosity. Grant didn't answer, his attention fully captured by whatever was appearing on his screen. His face paled slightly, his posture stiffening with each message he read. As passengers began deplaning, Grant finally looked up, his expression a complex mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Did you know about this?" "About what?" "The emergency court order. Filed while we were in the air." He held up his phone, showing a series of increasingly urgent messages from his legal team. "A judge has issued an expedited hearing. I'm required to appear within 72 hours or risk losing all parental rights permanently." Liana's surprise was genuine. "No, I didn't know. My attorney filed the standard petition, but there was no emergency order when I left Los Angeles." Grant studied her face, apparently determining she was telling the truth. "Then why?" "Mr. Mercer." A flight attendant appeared beside their row. "There's a group waiting for you at the gate. They asked me to inform you it's urgent." Grant nodded tersely, gathering his belongings with efficient movements. The professional mask was back in place, the vulnerable man who had asked about his son's feelings now hidden behind the composed exterior of a CEO managing a crisis. As they made their way up the jetway, Liana could see the commotion ahead. A cluster of suited individuals with anxious expressions, huddled near the gate area. Grant's team, clearly in damage control mode. "Grant," Liana said quietly, touching his arm to pause him before they reached the group. "Whatever happens with the legal proceedings, remember that Noah is a child who just wants to know his father. He's not a problem to be managed or a PR situation to control." Grant looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her gaze directly. For a moment, she glimpsed the man she had once known, thoughtful, intense, capable of deep feeling beneath his controlled exterior. "I want to meet him," he said simply. "Whatever else happens, whatever legal complications arise, I want to know my son." Before Liana could respond, they were engulfed by Grant's waiting team, his assistant, legal counsel, and what appeared to be public relations staff, all speaking urgently and simultaneously. "Mr. Mercer, we need to discuss strategy immediately. The judge has expedited the hearing due to the high-profile nature. Media inquiries are already coming in about a potential heir." Grant raised a hand, silencing them with a gesture. "Not here," he said firmly, his gaze still on Liana. "Ms. Brooks, we should continue this conversation privately. Would you be willing to meet later today?" The formality of Ms. Brooks stung slightly after the intimacy of their in-flight conversation, but Liana understood the shift. They were no longer alone, and Grant was back in his public role. "Yes," she agreed. "That would be appropriate." Grant nodded, then turned to his assistant. "Arrange a private conference room at the office. No interruptions, no calls." To his legal team, "I want the complete court filing and all relevant precedents reviewed before we meet. And no statements to the press. None." The authority in his voice was absolute, his team immediately responding to his directives. This was the Grant Mercer the business world knew, decisive, commanding, in control of every situation. As the group moved toward the terminal exit, Grant paused, turning back to Liana. "One more thing," he said, his voice softer. "May I see another picture of him?" The request, so personal amid the professional chaos, caught Liana off guard. She nodded, retrieving her phone and finding a different photo. Noah laughing, his head thrown back in pure joy as he played in a sprinkler on a summer day. Grant studied the image, his expression softening visibly. "He looks happy," he said quietly. "He is," Liana confirmed. "Most of the time." "Good." Grant handed the phone back, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. "That's what matters most." With that, he rejoined his waiting team, immediately absorbed in the urgent discussions about legal strategy and public relations management. Liana watched him go, struck by the contrast between the corporate figure striding confidently through the terminal and the man who had stared at his son's photo with wonder and regret. As she made her way to baggage claim, Liana's phone chimed with a text from her sister. "How did it go? Did you find him?" Liana smiled wryly at the question. Found him? Yes, in the most unexpected way possible. She typed a quick reply. Sitting next to him on the plane. Long story. Meeting him later today. Give Noah a hug for me. The response was immediate. What? Call me ASAP. But Liana had no time to call and explain the bizarre coincidence that had placed her beside Grant for 6 hours at 35,000 feet. Her attention was caught by a television monitor in the baggage claim area, tuned to a financial news channel. There, on the screen, was Grant's face, alongside a breaking news banner. Mercer Holdings CEO faces surprise paternity claim. Liana froze, watching in disbelief as the anchor reported. Breaking news in the business world this morning as Grant Mercer, CEO of Mercer Holdings, has been served with a paternity suit claiming he fathered a child 8 years ago. Sources close to the situation report that a judge has issued an expedited hearing due to the high-profile nature of the case. Mercer, who has maintained a notably private personal life despite his corporate visibility, has not yet commented on the allegations. Mercer Holdings stock is already responding to the news, down 3% in pre-market trading. How had this happened so quickly? The petition had only been filed days ago, and Liana had been assured the process would be handled discreetly. Now it was headline news: Grant's private life suddenly public, father, their son's existence a matter of financial speculation. Her phone rang. Diane Reeves, her attorney. Liana, have you seen the news? Diane asked without preamble. I'm looking at it right now, Liana replied, her voice tight. What happened? This was supposed to be a standard, private petition. Someone at the court leaked the filing, Diane explained, frustration evident in her tone. Once the media got hold of it, the judge issued the expedited order to get ahead of the publicity. I've been trying to reach you since it broke this morning. I was on the plane, Liana said. With Grant, as it turns out. We were seated next to each other. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. You're joking. I wish I were. I told him about Noah during the flight, gave him the petition papers. Then we landed to this media circus. This changes things, Diane said, her tone shifting to professional analysis. The publicity will put pressure on him to resolve this quickly and cleanly. His corporate image is at stake. I don't want Noah exposed to media attention, Liana said firmly. That was never the goal. I understand. I'll file a motion for privacy protections immediately. In the meantime, avoid making any public statements. Where are you staying in New York? The West Side Hotel, Liana replied. I'm meeting with Grant later today. Be careful what you agree to without legal representation, Diane cautioned. His team will be focused on damage control, not Noah's best interests. After ending the call, Liana collected her small suitcase and headed for the taxi stand, her mind racing. This was spiraling beyond her control, exactly what she had wanted to avoid. The legal petition was meant to establish clear parameters for Noah's sake, not to create a public scandal or damage Grant's reputation. As her taxi navigated through morning traffic toward Manhattan, Liana's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Car will collect you from your hotel at 2 p.m. for meeting. Private entrance to avoid media. G. The message was pure Grant, efficient, practical, already managing the situation. Liana replied with a simple acknowledgement, then settled back against the seat, watching the New York skyline emerge through the windshield. 8 years ago, she had walked away from Grant Mercer to protect herself from the pain of loving someone who couldn't make room for her in his life. Now fate had thrown them back together in the most unexpected way, connected forever through the son he was just discovering. Whatever happened in the coming days. In courtrooms or conference rooms, in private conversations or public statements, one truth remained constant: Noah deserved to know his father, and Grant deserved to know his son. Everything else was negotiable. The taxi pulled up to her hotel, where Liana noticed with dismay that several photographers were already gathered near the entrance. News traveled fast in the age of social media, and apparently someone had tracked her movements from the airport. Taking a deep breath, she paid the driver and stepped out, keeping her head down as she moved quickly toward the doors. The photographers immediately surged forward, cameras flashing, questions overlapping. "Ms. Brooks, is it true you're the mother of Grant Mercer's secret child? Why come forward after 8 years? Is this about money? Are you seeking a settlement from Mercer Holdings?" Liana kept walking, neither confirming nor denying, her face carefully neutral as hotel security moved to intercept the photographers. Once inside, the front desk manager approached immediately. "Ms. Brooks? We've been instructed to move you to a different room for privacy concerns. If you'll follow me, please." Confused but grateful, Liana followed the manager to the elevator. Instructed by whom? Mr. Mercer's office called ahead, the manager explained. They've arranged for a suite on a secure floor with private elevator access. They also mentioned that any charges should be forwarded to them. Liana's first instinct was to refuse, she didn't need Grant's money or special treatment. But the practical reality of photographers camped outside the hotel made the offer of increased security appealing, especially if this situation continued to escalate. The suite was elegant and spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. On the dining table sat a fruit basket with a note. For privacy and security. No strings attached. G. The gesture was thoughtful but also a reminder of the vast resources Grant commanded, how easily he could arrange suite upgrades and private elevators with a single phone call. It highlighted the disparity between their worlds, a gap that had only widened in the 8 years since they'd parted. Liana unpacked her small suitcase, then called her sister to check on Noah and explain the bizarre turn of events. He's fine, Mia assured her. Completely oblivious to the drama. He's currently explaining the difference between carnivores and omnivores to my cat, who seems appropriately impressed. Liana smiled, picturing the scene. Has he asked about why I went to New York? Only once. I told him you had important grown-up business, just like you said. He accepted it without question. Mia paused. But Lee, this media situation, it's going to reach him eventually. Kids at school, parents, someone will say something. I know, Liana sighed. That's why I need to resolve this quickly and get back home. I want to be the one to explain things to him, not have him hear it from somewhere else. So what's the plan with Grant? Beyond the legal proceedings? I don't know yet, Liana admitted. We're meeting this afternoon. He said he wants to meet Noah, but I have no idea what that looks like in practice. Will he want regular visitation? Will he want Noah to visit New York? Will he expect me to relocate? There are so many questions. One step at a time, Mia advised. First, establish what kind of father he wants to be. The logistics can follow. After ending the call, Liana spent the next few hours preparing for the meeting. Reviewing her notes from conversations with Diane, organizing her thoughts about what would be best for Noah, and steeling herself for what would undoubtedly be an emotional and complex negotiation. At precisely 2 p.m., the hotel phone rang with notification that her car had arrived. In the lobby, a discreet security team escorted her through a service entrance to a waiting black SUV with tinted windows. The driver, professional and taciturn, navigated through Manhattan traffic toward the gleaming tower that housed Mercer Holdings headquarters. Rather than the main entrance, the car pulled into a private underground garage, where another security team was waiting to escort her to a private elevator. The efficiency of the operation was impressive. Clearly, Grant had extensive experience managing situations that required discretion. The elevator opened directly into a conference room on the top floor of the building. Unlike the stereotypical corporate boardroom, this space was designed for comfort rather than intimidation, comfortable chairs, warm lighting, even a small seating area with couches in one corner. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the city, though privacy screens were currently engaged, filtering the afternoon sunlight. Grant was already there, standing at the window, his back to the door. He had changed from his travel clothes into a fresh suit, his posture rigid with tension. At the sound of the elevator, he turned. "Thank you for coming," he said formally, gesturing toward the seating area. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be fine," Liana replied, taking a seat on one of the couches. Grant pressed a button on a discreet panel, and moments later, a side door opened to reveal an assistant with a tray of water, coffee, and light refreshments. Once they were alone again, Grant sat across from Liana, maintaining a careful distance. "I apologize for the media situation," he began. "That was never my intention." "Nor mine," Liana assured him. "My attorney believes someone at the court leaked the filing." Grant nodded grimly. "My team reached the same conclusion. We're working to contain it, but the story has already spread widely. Mercer Holdings is a public company, so anything affecting me personally becomes financial news." "I'm sorry about that," Liana said sincerely. "This was never about damaging your reputation or affecting your company." "I know." Grant's expression softened slightly. "Despite how things ended between us, I know you're not vindictive. You wouldn't use our son as a weapon." The acknowledgement, "our son," hung in the air between them, both a connection and a reminder of all the years lost. "I've reviewed the court petition," Grant continued, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "The expedited hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. My legal team has prepared a response that acknowledges paternity based on the DNA test results included in your filing." Liana blinked in surprise. "You're not contesting paternity?" "Why would I?" Grant asked, genuine confusion in his expression. "The timeline aligns. The DNA markers are clear. And..." He hesitated. "He has my eyes. Exactly as I did at that age." The simple acknowledgement touched Liana unexpectedly. "Many men in your position would demand independent testing, drag out the proceedings. I'm not interested in delaying the inevitable or causing Noah additional uncertainty," Grant replied. "The facts are clear. He's my son. The legal process should reflect that reality as efficiently as possible." This practical approach was so characteristic of the Grant she had known, direct, logical, focused on solutions rather than complications. It was one of the qualities that had attracted her to him initially, before that same efficiency had been turned toward excising her from his life. "What happens after the hearing?" Liana asked, the question that had been weighing on her since their conversation on the plane. Grant leaned forward slightly, his expression intent. "That depends on what you're willing to consider. I want to be part of Noah's life, not just legally, but meaningfully. I've missed 8 years. I don't want to miss any more." "What does meaningfully look like to you?" Liana pressed. "Noah has school, friends, activities in Los Angeles. His medical team is there. His whole life is established." "I understand that," Grant acknowledged. "I'm not suggesting uprooting him. But I want regular visitation. Video calls when we're not together. Involvement in decisions about his education, his health, his future." He paused. "I want him to know me, Liana. And I want to know him." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the corporate CEO speaking, but the man beneath, the one who had stared at Noah's photo with wonder and regret. "That would require significant coordination," Liana pointed out. "Your life is here. Board meetings, investor calls, international travel. How do you envision fitting a child into that schedule?" "By rearranging my priorities," Grant said simply. "Something I should have done 8 years ago." The statement hung between them. An acknowledgement of his past failure, a promise of change. Liana studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Noah will have questions," she said finally. "Difficult ones. About why you weren't there, why you didn't know about him, why we separated. Are you prepared for that?" "I'll answer honestly," Grant replied. "In age-appropriate ways, but honestly. He deserves that." Liana nodded, appreciating his approach. "And the media attention? This story isn't going away quickly. How do we protect him from becoming tabloid fodder?" "My team is already implementing a strategy," Grant explained. "A simple statement acknowledging paternity, requesting privacy for Noah's sake, making it clear this is a private family matter. We'll follow with legal action against any outlet that publishes photos of him or details about his life." His use of "we" wasn't lost on Liana, the implicit partnership in protecting their son, regardless of their personal history. "There's something else we need to discuss," Grant continued, his expression growing more serious. "Financial support." Liana tensed immediately. "I told you, this isn't about money. Noah and I have managed fine on our own." "I don't doubt that," Grant replied. "But he's my son. I have a responsibility to provide for him, not just now, but for his future. College, graduate school if he chooses that path, the start of his adult life. I want to establish a trust that ensures those needs are met, regardless of what happens between us." The practicality of the proposal was difficult to argue with, though Liana still felt a reflexive resistance. "I don't want him growing up with a sense of entitlement or believing money solves everything." "Neither do I," Grant agreed. "The trust would be structured for education and important life milestones, not lavish spending. And I would follow your lead on day-to-day matters. No extravagant gifts or attempts to buy his affection." His willingness to defer to her judgment on these matters, to acknowledge her expertise as Noah's primary parent, eased some of Liana's concerns. "When do you want to meet him?" she asked, the question that mattered most. Grant's composed expression faltered slightly, revealing the emotional weight beneath. "As soon as possible," he admitted. "But only when you think he's ready, and in whatever setting would make him most comfortable." "He's ready now," Liana said softly. "He's been asking about you for months. That's what prompted all of this." Hope flickered across Grant's features. "Then, could I fly to Los Angeles this weekend? After the legal proceedings are settled. Meet him in his home environment, where he feels secure." The request was thoughtful, prioritizing Noah's comfort over Grant's convenience. Another sign that perhaps he had indeed changed from the man who had once dismissed their relationship as a distraction from his real responsibilities. "I think that would work," Liana agreed. "But I want to prepare him first, explain who you are, why you're coming. And the first meeting should be brief, no overwhelming him with too much at once." "Of course," Grant nodded. "Whatever you think is best. You know him. I'm just learning." The humility in his tone, so different from the commanding presence he projected in his professional life, reminded Liana of the Grant she had fallen in love with years ago. The man who, despite his brilliance and ambition, had been capable of genuine vulnerability with her. Their conversation continued for another hour, working through practical details of co-parenting across distance, discussing Noah's personality and needs, and establishing boundaries for their new relationship as parents rather than former lovers. Throughout, Grant remained attentive and respectful, asking thoughtful questions about Noah's life and deferring to Liana's experience while still asserting his desire to be meaningfully involved. As their meeting drew to a close, Grant hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket. "I have something for Noah," he said, withdrawing a small box. "If you think it's appropriate." He opened it to reveal a compass, not a toy, but a finely crafted instrument with a personal inscription on the back. "For Noah. To help you find your way forward. Your father. I remember you telling me once that your father gave you a compass when you were about Noah's age," Liana said softly, recognizing the significance of the gift. Grant nodded, surprised she had remembered. "It was the most meaningful gift he ever gave me. Something about knowing how to find true north, no matter how lost you might feel." He closed the box carefully. "But if you think it's too much for a first meeting." "No," Liana interrupted gently. It's perfect. Thoughtful without being extravagant. Personal without being overwhelming. He'll love it. Relief washed over Grant's features. Thank you, he said simply. As they prepared to leave, Grant paused. There's one more thing, he said, his tone shifting slightly. About tomorrow's hearing. What about it? My father's name, the Mercer name, carries certain expectations. Responsibilities. Legacy. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I want Noah to have the option of that name, that connection to his heritage, if and when he wants it. Liana understood immediately. You want him to have your last name. Not necessarily immediately, Grant clarified. But legally recognized as an option. Perhaps hyphenated with Brooks, or as a middle name. Something that acknowledges his place in both families. The request touched on complex emotions for Liana. Pride in the family she had built alone, concern about Noah's identity being shaped by a name with such public weight, uncertainty about what it would mean for their future. Let me think about it, she said finally. This isn't just about legal documents. It's about who Noah understands himself to be. Grant nodded, accepting her need for consideration. Of course. As the private elevator arrived to take Liana back to the waiting car, Grant extended his hand formally. Thank you for coming today. And for. He hesitated, for raising our son so well. For being the parent I wasn't there to be. Liana took his hand, the contact brief but charged with their complicated history. He's an amazing kid. You'll see for yourself soon. I look forward to that more than you can imagine, Grant replied, his voice soft with genuine emotion. The next morning, Liana arrived at the courthouse to find it surrounded by media. Financial reporters, entertainment journalists, even international press drawn by the story of the billionaire CEO and his newly discovered heir. Grant's security team met her at a side entrance, escorting her through private corridors to a conference room where Diane was waiting. The judge has agreed to close the courtroom, Diane explained. Only essential personnel and legal representatives will be present. Mr. Mercer's team has already filed their response acknowledging paternity and proposing a support and visitation framework. They've been efficient, Liana observed. Very, Diane agreed. I've reviewed their proposal. It's surprisingly reasonable. Generous without being excessive, structured with Noah's best interests clearly in mind. They've even included provisions for your input on all major decisions. Before Liana could respond, the door opened and Grant entered with his legal team. 3 impeccably dressed attorneys who radiated competence and discretion. Grant himself looked perfectly composed in a conservative suit, though Liana noticed the slight shadows under his eyes suggesting he had slept no better than she had. Ms. Brooks, he greeted her formally, mindful of the professional setting. I hope you weren't too troubled by the media presence. Your security team was very helpful, Liana replied, matching his tone. The attorneys exchanged introductions and final document reviews, their conversation a blur of legal terminology and procedural details. Throughout, Grant remained focused and engaged, occasionally asking clarifying questions or suggesting minor adjustments to ensure the agreement reflected their discussions from the previous day. When they were finally called into the courtroom, the judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, wasted no time on preliminaries. I've reviewed the petition and response, she began. Both parties acknowledge paternity based on DNA evidence, and there appears to be agreement on the framework for support and visitation. Is that correct? Both legal teams confirmed this assessment. Very well. Given the high-profile nature of this case and the potential impact on the minor child, I appreciate the cooperative approach both parties have taken. The judge reviewed the proposed agreement carefully. Mr. Mercer, the financial provisions here are substantial. Are you fully committed to these obligations? Grant stood, his posture straight, his voice clear. Yes, Your Honor. They represent my responsibility to my son, a responsibility I intend to fulfill not just financially, but personally, for the rest of my life." The judge nodded, apparently satisfied with his sincerity. "Ms. Brooks, the visitation schedule proposed here would introduce significant changes to your son's routine. Are you comfortable with this arrangement?" Liana rose, feeling the weight of the moment. "Yes, Your Honor. The schedule has been designed with Noah's best interests in mind, allowing him to develop a relationship with his father while maintaining the stability of his home environment. There is one matter not fully resolved in these documents," the judge noted. "The question of the child's legal name. The petition indicates his current name is Noah James Brooks. Mr. Mercer has requested consideration of incorporating the Mercer name in some form. What is your position on this, Ms. Brooks?" Liana had spent much of the night considering this question, weighing all the implications for Noah's identity and future. "Your Honor, after careful consideration, I believe Noah should have the option of connecting to both sides of his heritage. I would support amending his legal name to Noah James Brooks Mercer, with the understanding that in daily life, he may choose which name to use as he grows older and forms his own identity." She felt rather than saw Grant's reaction, a slight shift in his posture, a barely audible exhale of relief and gratitude. This concession meant more to him than perhaps anything else in the agreement, acknowledging Noah's place in the Mercer lineage while respecting the life and identity Liana had built for him. The judge made notes, then looked up. "That seems a reasonable compromise. I'll include that provision in the final order." She signed the documents with a decisive flourish. The court recognizes Grant Mercer as the legal father of Noah James Brooks Mercer, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. The support and visitation arrangements outlined in this agreement are hereby ordered. Given the public interest in this case, all records will be sealed to protect the minor child's privacy. With a final tap of her gavel, it was done. 8 years of separation, of unspoken truths, of a father unknowing and a son wondering, all addressed in a 30-minute legal proceeding that would forever change 3 lives. As they exited the courtroom through a private corridor, Grant fell into step beside Liana, their legal teams following at a discreet distance. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the name. It means more than I can express." "It's his heritage too," Liana replied simply. "He deserves to know all parts of who he is." They reached the exit where separate cars waited to take them through the media gauntlet outside. Grant paused, turning to face Liana directly. "I'll make the travel arrangements for this weekend," he said. "Unless you think we should wait longer." "No," Liana decided. "Better to move forward now. Noah's been waiting long enough for answers." Grant nodded, his expression softening. "What should I bring? Besides the compass, I mean. Is there anything he particularly likes or needs?" The question, so ordinary, so parental, struck Liana unexpectedly. This was the reality of their new relationship. Discussing their son's preferences, coordinating visits, making decisions together after years of separation. "He loves books about space and dinosaurs," she offered. "And logic puzzles. Nothing electronic or expensive for this first meeting, keep it simple." "Noted," Grant replied with the ghost of a smile. "Space, dinosaurs, puzzles. I can work with that." As they prepared to part ways, Grant hesitated, then asked the question that clearly weighed on him most, "Do you think he'll like me?" The vulnerability in his voice, the uncertainty of a powerful man facing perhaps the most important introduction of his life, touched Liana deeply. "He's been imagining you for years," she said gently. "The real you will be different from that imagination in some ways. But yes, I think he'll like you. You're his father. Part of him has been waiting for you his whole life." Relief washed over Grant's features. "I'll see you in Los Angeles, then." "Saturday morning." Saturday morning, Liana confirmed. They parted ways, each to their separate cars, separate flights, separate lives that were now irrevocably connected through the son they shared. The flight back to Los Angeles gave Liana time to process the whirlwind events of the past 48 hours and to prepare for the conversation she would need to have with Noah. How did one explain to a 7-year-old that his father, a man he had wondered about but never met, was suddenly entering his life? That this stranger was actually half of who he was, genetically speaking? That their small family of 2 was expanding in ways neither of them had anticipated? By the time she arrived home, Liana had formulated a plan, simple, honest, age-appropriate. Mia brought Noah home from school, hugging Liana tightly before discreetly leaving them alone for this important conversation. "Mom!" Noah exclaimed, throwing his arms around her waist. "You're back. Did you bring me something from New York?" Liana laughed, kneeling to return his hug properly. "I brought myself back to you. Isn't that enough?" Noah pretended to consider this seriously. "I guess so. But a souvenir would have been nice too." "Well, I did bring something," Liana said, leading him to the couch. "Not exactly a souvenir, but something important." "News." Noah settled beside her, immediately alert to her serious tone. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news, I think," Liana replied carefully. "But big news. Remember how you've been asking about your dad lately? Who he is, what he's like?" Noah nodded, his expression suddenly intensely focused. "Did you find him? In New York?" "Actually, yes," Liana confirmed, impressed by his intuition. "That's why I went there. To talk to him." "Does he know about me now?" Noah asked, the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Yes, he does. And he wants to meet you very much." Noah absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. Why didn't he know about me before? This was the difficult part, explaining their separation without vilifying Grant or oversimplifying complex adult relationships. "When your dad and I broke up, I didn't know I was pregnant with you yet. By the time I found out, we weren't talking anymore. He had moved to New York, and I stayed in California. Why didn't you tell him later?" Noah pressed, his logical mind seeking the missing pieces. Liana took a deep breath. "That's a complicated grown-up question. Sometimes when people are hurt or scared, they make choices that seem right at the time but look different later. I thought I was protecting both of us by not telling him. But as you got older and started asking questions, I realized you deserved to know your father, and he deserved to know you." Noah considered this explanation, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Is he mad that you didn't tell him?" "He was surprised," Liana answered honestly. "And sad about missing the first part of your life. But mostly, he's excited to meet you and get to know you now." "When?" Noah asked, the practical question of a child more concerned with concrete details than emotional complexities. "This Saturday," Liana replied. "He's coming here, to our home, so you can meet in a place where you feel comfortable." Noah's eyes widened. "This Saturday? That's only 3 days away. Is that too soon?" Liana asked, suddenly concerned. "We can wait longer if you need more time to get used to the idea." "No." Noah exclaimed. "I've been waiting forever. 3 more days is already too long." Liana laughed, relieved by his enthusiasm. "Well, I'm afraid we'll have to wait those 3 days. He lives in New York, remember? He needs time to arrange his trip." "What's his name?" Noah asked. "What does he do? Does he look like me?" The questions came in rapid succession, Noah's curiosity now fully engaged. Liana answered each one patiently, sharing carefully selected details about Grant, his name, his work, simplified to, he runs a big company, and yes, the striking resemblance between father and son, especially their eyes. "There's one more thing," Liana added. "About your name." Noah looked confused. "My name?" "Yes. Right now, your full name is Noah James Brooks. But your dad's last name is Mercer." We've decided, if it's okay with you, to make your official name Noah James Brooks Mercer. So you have both our family names. Noah tested the sound of it. Noah Brooks Mercer. He nodded approvingly. I like it. It sounds important. You are important, Liana assured him. With or without any particular name. But this way, your name reflects both sides of your family. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation, both practical and emotional. Noah vacillated between excitement and nervousness about meeting his father, peppering Liana with questions she sometimes couldn't answer. What was Grant's favorite color? Did he like dinosaurs too? Was he good at math? Would he want to play catch or build models or read books? We'll find out together, Liana told him gently. Remember, he's getting to know you just as much as you're getting to know him. On Friday evening, Grant texted to confirm his arrival time the next morning. The message was brief but revealed his own nervousness. Arriving LAX 8:30 a.m., should be at your place by 10 if traffic cooperates. Is there anything specific I should know before meeting him? Things he likes/dislikes. Topics to avoid. Liana smiled at the uncharacteristic uncertainty from a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms and managing billion-dollar deals. She replied with reassurance. He's excited to meet you. Just be yourself. He loves talking about space, dinosaurs, and logical puzzles. He's curious about everything. Don't talk down to him, he can tell when adults do that. And don't worry so much. He's already prepared to like you. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Noah was up early, too excited to sleep, carefully selecting his outfit, not too fancy, but not too casual either, right Mom? And repeatedly asking what time it was. Liana managed her own nervousness by cleaning the already tidy apartment and preparing a simple lunch they could share later if the meeting went well. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Noah froze in the middle of the living room, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of the moment. Liana gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Ready? She asked softly. Noah nodded, his expression a mixture of anticipation and apprehension that mirrored what Liana imagined Grant must be feeling on the other side of the door. She opened the door to find Grant standing there, looking both familiar and strange, the same commanding presence she remembered, but dressed more casually than she had seen him in years, in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He held a small gift bag in one hand and what appeared to be a book in the other. Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange of support and understanding passing between them. Then Grant's gaze shifted past her to the small figure standing in the middle of the living room. For a moment, time seemed suspended. Father and son, seeing each other for the first time, taking in the unmistakable resemblance that no DNA test could make more clear than this visual confirmation. The same storm-blue eyes, the same serious set to their expressions, the same analytical gaze assessing and absorbing every detail. Noah, Liana said gently, this is your father, Grant Mercer. Grant stepped forward, kneeling to Noah's level with a grace that surprised Liana. Hello, Noah, he said, his voice warm but not overly familiar. I've been looking forward to meeting you very much. Noah studied him intently, his natural shyness temporarily overwhelming his curiosity. You have eyes like mine, he said finally. Actually, Grant replied with a small smile, you have eyes like mine. I had them first, being older and all. The gentle joke broke the tension. Noah smiled, revealing the gap where he'd recently lost a tooth. Mom says I have your brain too. That we think the same way. Your mom is very smart, Grant said, glancing up at Liana with genuine appreciation. She's always been good at understanding people. Do you like space? Noah asked, the question clearly a test of compatibility. I do, Grant confirmed. In fact. He held out the book he'd brought, a large, beautifully illustrated volume on astronomy. I thought you might enjoy this. It has the latest images from the Webb telescope and information about exoplanets they've discovered recently. Noah's eyes widened as he accepted the book, immediately opening it to examine the contents. Wow! This shows the actual colors the nebulae really are, not just the enhanced images. He looked up at Grant with new respect. You know about space stuff? Some, Grant acknowledged. Though I suspect you might know more than I do about certain aspects. I hear you're quite the expert on our solar system. The conversation flowed more easily after that, Noah gradually warming up as he discovered shared interests and perspectives with this man who had suddenly appeared in his life. Grant listened attentively to Noah's detailed explanations of his solar system model, asked thoughtful questions about his school projects, and shared carefully selected stories from his own childhood that revealed connections between them. Liana observed from a slight distance, giving them space to establish their own relationship while remaining present for support. She was struck by how naturally Grant adapted to interacting with Noah. No condescension, no awkward forced enthusiasm, just genuine interest and respect for his son's thoughts and feelings. After about an hour, when Noah excused himself to get his dinosaur collection to show Grant, Liana approached with a glass of water. You're doing well with him, she said quietly. Grant accepted the water gratefully. He's incredible, Liana. So bright, so articulate. You've done an amazing job. He makes it easy, she replied. He's always been curious and engaged with the world. Like you, Grant observed. Like both of us, Liana corrected gently. Noah returned with a box of carefully organized dinosaur figures, launching into a detailed explanation of the different periods and species. Grant listened with the same focused attention he might give to a key investor or board member, asking questions that revealed he had done some research of his own on the topic. When Noah mentioned his fascination with the logical puzzles of paleontology, how scientists piece together information from fragmentary evidence, Grant reached for the gift bag he had brought. That reminds me, he said. I brought something else you might enjoy. Noah opened the bag to find the compass, his expression curious as he examined the finely crafted instrument. It's a compass, Grant explained. It always points north, no matter where you are or how turned around you might feel. He showed Noah how to use it, then turned it over to reveal the inscription. Noah read it aloud, for Noah. To help you find your way forward. Your father. He looked up, his expression suddenly serious. Are you going to stay? In my life, I mean. Not just today. The directness of the question, so characteristic of children but rarely encountered in Grant's carefully managed adult world, seemed to catch him off guard. But he recovered quickly, meeting Noah's gaze with equal seriousness. Yes, he said firmly. I've missed too much of your life already. I don't intend to miss any more. We'll have to figure out exactly how it works, with me living in New York and you here, but I promise you this, I will be your father not just in name, but in all the ways that matter. Noah considered this, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. Good, he said finally. Because I have a lot of questions only a dad can answer. I'll do my best, Grant promised. And when I don't know the answer, we'll figure it out together. The morning extended into afternoon, the three of them sharing the lunch Liana had prepared, the conversation flowing more easily as Noah's initial shyness gave way to his natural curiosity and Grant's corporate reserve melted in the face of his son's openness. When it was finally time for Grant to leave, a departure he clearly found difficult, Noah surprised both adults by initiating a hug. Will you come back tomorrow? He asked, his arms still around Grant's neck. Grant looked to Liana, deferring to her judgment on how quickly to proceed. When she nodded her permission, he turned back to Noah. Yes, I'll come back tomorrow. And we can talk on video calls when I'm in New York. And you and your mom can visit me there sometimes, if you'd like to see where I live and work. Can I see your office? Noah asked eagerly. Is it at the top of a really tall building? Grant laughed. It is, actually. With a view of the whole city. Cool, Noah declared, clearly impressed. After Noah had gone to his room to examine his new book more closely, Grant lingered at the door, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. "Thank you," he said quietly to Liana. "For today." "For him." "For." He gestured vaguely, seemingly at a loss for words. "For not keeping him from you any longer?" Liana suggested gently. "Yes," Grant acknowledged. "Though I understand why you did. The man I was 8 years ago. The one who called our relationship a distraction, he wouldn't have been a good father. He was too focused on control, on legacy as something built through corporate success rather than human connection." The self-awareness surprised Liana. "And now? Now I understand what really matters," Grant said simply. "What true legacy looks like. It's not stock prices or market share or buildings with my name on them. It's him. It's the chance to be part of his life, to help shape the person he becomes." As he prepared to leave, Grant hesitated. "There's one more thing we should discuss. About the media situation." Liana tensed slightly. "What about it?" "My team has managed to contain most of it, but there's still interest in the story." "In Noah." Grant's expression grew serious. "I want to protect him from that attention, but I also want to be transparent with you about the reality of being connected to the Mercer name. There will be scrutiny, curiosity, sometimes intrusion." "I know," Liana acknowledged. "I've thought about it a lot these past few days. We'll need to prepare him, establish clear boundaries, maybe even consider security measures at some point." "I've already arranged for discreet security monitoring of your apartment and Noah's school," Grant admitted. "Nothing intrusive, just precautionary. I should have consulted you first, but you were being protective," Liana finished for him. "It's okay. I understand the impulse." Grant nodded, grateful for her understanding. "We'll figure this out together, how to give him as normal a childhood as possible while acknowledging the reality of public interest in our situation." "One day at a time," Liana agreed. "That's how we've always managed." As Grant finally turned to leave, he paused one last time. "He has your heart, you know. Your compassion. Your way of making people feel heard. Those are gifts far more valuable than anything he inherited from me." The observation, so personal, so perceptive, caught Liana off guard. "Thank you for seeing that," she said softly. After Grant left, Liana found Noah in his room, already deeply absorbed in the astronomy book, the compass placed carefully on his nightstand. "What do you think?" she asked, sitting beside him on the bed. "About meeting your dad?" Noah considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "He's different than I imagined," he said finally. "But better, I think. He doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby. And he really listens when I explain things. That's important," Liana agreed. "He has sad eyes sometimes," Noah observed, surprising Liana with his perception. "When he thinks I'm not looking. Is he sad because he missed when I was little?" Liana chose her words carefully. "I think he regrets not knowing you sooner." "That's a kind of sadness, yes." Noah nodded, processing this. "I told him it's okay. That we can make up for it now." Tears pricked at Liana's eyes, her son's capacity for forgiveness and understanding far exceeding what might be expected of his age. "That was very kind of you. It's true though, isn't it?" Noah asked, looking up at her. "We can make up for the time he missed." "Not completely," Liana said honestly. "Those years are gone. But you have many, many more years ahead to build your relationship with him. And I think he's going to try very hard to make those years count." Noah seemed satisfied with this answer. "I like having a dad," he declared. "Even if he just got here." The simple statement encapsulated everything. The loss of what might have been, the acceptance of what was, the hope for what could still develop. Liana hugged her son close, marveling at his resilience and wisdom. "I'm glad," she whispered. "I'm so glad." The days that followed established a new pattern to their lives. Grant extended his stay in Los Angeles, rearranging meetings and delegating responsibilities to remain close to Noah during these crucial early days of their relationship. He visited daily, each interaction building on the foundation established during their first meeting. Liana observed the developing bond between father and son with a mixture of joy and wistfulness, joy at Noah's happiness, wistfulness for the years lost that could never be reclaimed. Grant proved to be a natural father, his analytical mind and attention to detail perfectly suited to Noah's curious, logical approach to the world. They built models together, discussed scientific concepts, and gradually began sharing the more personal aspects of their lives and thoughts. One evening, after Noah had gone to bed following a day spent at the Natural History Museum with Grant, Liana found herself sitting across from her former love at her small kitchen table, sharing a cup of tea in companionable silence. "He asked about us today," Grant said finally. "About our relationship. How we met, why we separated." Liana tensed slightly. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, in simple terms. That we met in college, that we loved each other, that when my father died and I took over the company, I made choices that hurt you. That the separation was my fault, not yours." Grant's gaze was direct, unflinching. "I didn't want him thinking you kept us apart out of spite or selfishness. He needed to know that the responsibility was mine." The honesty of his response, the willingness to accept blame rather than share it, touched Liana deeply. "Thank you for that." "It's just the truth," Grant replied simply. "Something I've had to face more directly since discovering Noah. The man I became after my father died, driven, controlling, obsessed with the company, he wasn't someone I'm proud of now." "Grief changes people," Liana offered. "And the pressure you were under was enormous." "It was," Grant acknowledged. "But that doesn't excuse how I treated you. Calling what we had a distraction, when it was the most real thing in my life, that was unforgivable." The conversation had shifted into territory they had carefully avoided during the past weeks, their personal history, the pain of their separation, the feelings that might still linger beneath the co-parenting relationship they were establishing. "I've forgiven you," Liana said quietly. "I had to, for my own peace. And seeing you with Noah now. How you listen to him, respect him, prioritize his needs, it helps heal some of those old wounds." Grant's expression softened. "He makes it easy to be better than I was. To remember what actually matters." "Children have that effect," Liana agreed with a small smile. "They cut through all the nonsense and remind us of what's essential." They lapsed into silence again, the unspoken question hanging between them, where did they go from here? They had established a functional co-parenting relationship, but the connection between them, the history, the lingering awareness, the new appreciation developing through their shared love for Noah, remained undefined. "I need to return to New York next week," Grant said finally. "The board is getting restless, and there are decisions that require my physical presence." Liana nodded, having expected this. The extended stay in Los Angeles was always temporary, a necessary accommodation for these first crucial weeks of Noah meeting his father. "How will we handle the distance?" she asked, the practical question that had been on her mind. "I've been thinking about that," Grant replied. "I'd like to establish a regular schedule, video calls every evening when I'm in New York, visits to LA at least twice a month, perhaps longer stays during school breaks. And when Noah is comfortable with the idea, visits to New York so he can see that part of his life too." The plan was thoughtful, prioritizing consistency and Noah's comfort, evidence of how seriously Grant was taking his newfound role as father. "That sounds reasonable," Liana agreed. "We can adjust as needed, see what works best for him." "And for you," Grant added, his gaze intent. "This affects your life too, Liana. Your schedule, your plans. I want to be respectful of that." The consideration, so different from the dismissive attitude that had characterized the end of their relationship, reminded Liana again of how much Grant had changed, or perhaps of how much he had returned to the man she had first fallen in love with. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "We'll figure it out together. For Noah's sake." "For Noah's sake," Grant echoed, though something in his expression suggested he might be thinking beyond their son's welfare alone. The week before Grant's departure for New York brought a new development, an invitation for Noah to visit his father's office in Los Angeles, to see where he worked when in the city. Liana accompanied them, curious herself about this aspect of Grant's life that had once seemed so at odds with their relationship. The Mercer Holdings offices occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. As they entered the lobby, Liana was struck by the immediate deference shown to Grant. Security personnel, receptionists. If this story moved you, share with someone who believes in second chances. That's how love multiplies. Subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you, broken things can still bloom. Leave a comment with one lesson you've taken from the story. Your reflection might inspire our next episode.